Item: SCP-958. Object Class: Safe. Special Containment Procedures: SCP-958-A instances are to be contained in Storage Unit 11 at site in an inactive state. SCP-958-B instances are to be contained in Storage Unit 13 at site if neutralization is not feasible. Description: SCP-958-A is a humanoid toy robot, composed primarily of plastic and tin. SCP-958-A is 19 cm tall and has a mass of 214.8 grams. The words General Beep registered sign by Dr. Wondertainment are inscribed upon the bottom of SCP-958-A's right foot. When activated via a switch on the back of its head, SCP-958-A becomes capable of speech and limited autonomous movement. It will use these to actively seek out a child under the age of 13. While it will respond to those of or over the age of 13, it will often attempt to redirect conversation toward aiding it in finding a child. When exposed to a child under the age of 13, SCP-958-A will frequently discuss historical military accomplishments and will often suggest exposing other children to it or other instances of SCP-958-A. These conversations exhibit no compulsive effects, and the child is able to deactivate SCP-958-A via its switch without any resistance. Should the child express interest in what SCP-958-A discusses and/or plays with an active SCP-958-A for a cumulative 6 hours, SCP-958-A will give the child information on how to build an instance of SCP-958-B. This information cannot be used by anyone other than the child in question. Attempts by other individuals to utilize it will result in a non-anomalous creation, with similar results when a previously exposed child turns 13. Further mental effects caused by SCP-958-A are currently being studied. However, it is highly likely that SCP-958-A somehow affects how children interpret SCP-958-B and scenarios involving them. Furthermore, unconfirmed testimonies claim SCP-958-A will suggest uses for SCP-958-B in games and activities. For further information, see Addendum A. SCP-958-B are objects created using the knowledge imparted by SCP-958-A. SCP-958-B instances vary greatly in appearance and function, but all recorded instances have been weapons of some form created from a wide variety of miscellaneous objects. Ammunition and payloads used by SCP-958-B are unconventional and/or anomalous. Notable examples include bursts of non-anomalous paint, toys and plush dolls ejected at high speeds, and beams of focused light capable of melting steel.